Most people are in a very peaceful, strong state, doing what they feel is right, what they're passionate about. People are standing and unifying all around our country. And that's a story that we need to be telling.
Every day, we're bombarded by everything wrong in the world. When we pick up our phone, turn on the TV, or listen to the radio, we hear all about the heartbreak and destruction happening across the globe. But what if we could change that? What if we could begin to heal the world by focusing on all that's right? We're surrounded by stories of those helping their communities, achieving amazing things, and overcoming insurmountable obstacles. My name is Kelly Rowland, and it's my mission to share stories of love, hope, and inspiration on Born to Inspire podcast. Welcome to episode 14 of Born to Inspire podcast. I hope all is well with everyone listening and that you're safe, healthy, and happy. Speaking of happy, today's guest is Paula Francis, co-founder and president of Gross National Happiness USA, a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing our personal happiness and collective well-being by changing how we measure progress and success. About 7 years ago, I came across this amazing documentary called Happy and completely fell in love with it. The documentary changed my life, literally, and it explores happiness through multiple countries and introduced me to the study of positive psychology. And for the sake of being completely transparent, I've been through a couple of bouts of serious depressions in my life, and ever since I first saw this documentary, I've been acutely aware of the importance of happiness in respect to my health and quality of life. Gross National Happiness is featured on Happy, and I'm proud to have Paula on the show. But before we get started, here's a quick motivational message from Bryce Weiler, the co-founder of the Beautiful Lives Project and a sportscaster who's been blind since birth. What are some simple ways that a person can give back?
A person can give back by reaching out to people who they have not talked to in a while through emails, phone calls, text messages, social media. They can go out on the street and wearing their mask and being safe to the guidelines that have been put forth by the state government. They can visit with people as they walk by their front porch. They can help someone in the grocery store. They can contact people they've never met before. They could call some strange random numbers in the phone book and see how people are doing. That would always be interesting. And of course, one has to have an actual physical phone book to do that, but there are phone books on the internet, so people can do that. People could also chat with people on the internet. They could contact new people on Skype or Twitter or whatever social media is their favorite thing. Just reaching out to people in whatever form or fashion works for you, not just strangers, but family and friends who you've talked to recently, or especially some who you have not talked to in a while, because everyone needs that chance to have conversation and needs to know that someone is caring about them, someone is thinking about them, and someone is hoping that their life is going as fantastic as it can be.
Thank you, Bryce. And now, Paula Francis with Gross National Happiness USA.
Welcome to Born to Inspire podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I've known about Gross National Happiness for years now, and it's just so exciting to be able to learn more. Could you give us a little background on what Gross National Happiness is, how it started, and how you came to organize it here in the U.S.?
Sure. So this goes way back to the 70s in Bhutan, which is a small Himalayan country, where the king said that what matters most in life for people and the major priority for governance is the people's happiness. So they never had a gross domestic product. When they opened up the doors to their country, a reporter came in and asked them about their gross domestic product, and the king said, "That's not what we do. We are concerned about the well-being of people and animals and the planet." So that kind of spread and has really caught fire around the world. And there is a real push to have countries pay attention to this kind of alternative way of measuring success and progress. So I heard about this going back to 2008. A friend of mine actually was in Bhutan for a conference on gross national happiness and came back and pulled together a few colleagues, and we said we have to do something like this in the United States. The gross domestic product is not a reflection of our well-being. It doesn't consider so many things that are valuable in life, and it gives us a very skewed view of what matters and pushes policy in a direction that actually can be counter to our happiness and well-being. So from that point, we created this organization, Gross National Happiness USA, to bring that concept here to the United States. It's been a long process. It's been an educational process mostly, but our goal is to create that huge paradigm shift from a gross domestic product point of view to one that includes measures of well-being across the board.
How has the shift been going? Do you see a big difference from when you started?
It has gone slowly, but it has gone forward. So that's positive news.
Good.
I actually started walking around the country back in 2012 to just get a sense of people in the United States, what truly matters and what we really ought to be measuring, because we couldn't assume that what worked for this tiny Buddhist country in Bhutan would work necessarily for the people of such a diverse and large country in the United States. So I started walking in 2012. I finished walking 10,000 miles this past November. And from the beginning of the walk until this past November, there has been an incredible increase in awareness about the fact, number one, that gross domestic product does not represent our values. And that two, there are other ways to think about success and progress. And three, this is very, very doable. And four, there are places across our country that are implementing these expanded measures of well-being to create that shift locally. And in some cases, entire states are looking at expanded measures of well-being to create their budgets, to create their economic development plans and whatnot. So I would say slowly it's happening, but more and more people are aware and on board for a shift that just, it needs to happen.
I feel like there's more of an awareness of the importance of happiness now than there was, let's say, in the 80s when I was a kid. I don't think people really talked about it, or, you know, they didn't talk about depression and stuff like that. I think it's come a long ways, from what I could tell.
I think you're right. I mean, just go into a bookstore when you can go into a bookstore,
Yeah.
and you'll see the shelves aligned with happiness titles, right?
Right.
And how to create more happiness in our lives. Very, very important. And we need to do that for ourselves. We are responsible for our internal happiness. What Gross National Happiness USA does is pairs that personal happiness with societal happiness, because the conditions of our policies and practices need to support our thriving, support our seeking of happiness, our expression of our own personal happiness. So I would say you're absolutely right. People are saying this is important. I don't know why it took us this long, really, to have this conversation, but I'm glad it's happening.
But you think government needs to be more involved in our happiness, right? Or in promoting happiness rather than product. Do I understand that correctly?
You absolutely do. I think
Okay.
when we solely look at products,
Yeah.
money and stuff, and measure that, which is what gross domestic product does, right? And when you look at Wall Street, and what we're measuring is our productivity solely on the basis of what we what material well-being, then we're missing the boat on all the things that we know, the scientifically based evidence of what create happiness for people. And I don't want, and I've got to emphasize for also for animals, all beings, and the planet. So a gross domestic product view rarely takes into consideration how we treat our environment.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said earlier, oftentimes is counter to the health and well-being and sustainability of our planet.
Yeah.
And we know we need to take care of that.
So what kind of conversations has your organization had with the government? Have you had meetings? What does that look like? What's going on there?
So those conversations are happening, and not as much as they need to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, what we have really focused on is the data collection to make sure that when we promote certain policies and practices and measures, mostly measures and ways to measure our happiness and well-being, that we are talking about the very things that people in the United States value. So, as I said, we stopped collecting that information back in November, so it's only been a few months now, and we have 10,000 miles and 7 years worth of interviews that we are now transcribing and analyzing and trying to make sense of so that we can promote the measures that reflect the people here, right? And right now, they're very consistent, in fact, with what measures are in place in, say, places like Bhutan. Okay? We know that our social connectedness truly matters. We care about people. People care about people. People care about taking care of other people, right? We really value service to others. That's came out very, very clearly. Up to 44% of the people that were interviewed responded in that fashion. But there are other things that were also of great importance to people, and that includes things such as our psychological well-being. Okay? Let's take a look at that in light of what's happening right now. Are people feeling valued?
Right.
Is there equity across the things that we value and the people that we value? Then we also found something that was very surprising for me, which was our spirituality matters very much. So these are things that you're not going to see captured in a gross domestic product measure, right? So our spirituality, seeing one another as spiritual beings, would we impart violence on one another if we saw one another as a valuable human? I mean, it gets down to the nature of our humanity, I believe.
Now, I know you're co-founder and president of Gross National Happiness. In addition, you're chief happiness walker. That's what I read. And could you talk a little bit more about what that involves? You go from city to city. Do you at least get a bus or something to drive you there? But you walk the whole way?
I walk the whole way. So this is a project that has come to conclusion, and it was a literal walk, step by step, connecting every step over the course of 7 years with breaks in between. That I went down from Vermont, where I was living at the time, down the East Coast, down along the southern border of the country, up the West Coast, and then through Central America back east, where I arrived last November. And walking on the sides of streets, running into people where they live, where they work, where they play, and just asking everyone that I met and had conversation with and recorded what they thought for them mattered most in life. And this is the data that we're now taking a deep look at.
Now, is that data gonna make its way into a documentary or anything like that? Or is it
That
just
is,
data?
that would be the hope. I have some people that are very interested in helping us look at a documentary because I think the voices of people need to be heard. You don't need me to be telling you what people say. People can speak for themselves, and we
Mhm.
have some very good footage of people talking from the heart about what truly matters. Some of it video, some of it audio recording, but I would hope that we get to that point because we need to truly listen to one another. That was a huge lesson of this walk, is so many people don't feel heard.
Right.
So many people feel invisible, right? When you
Yeah.
walk into a camp in the woods full of people who are homeless because they don't feel they fit in to society, that's uncomfortable. You know, we need to hear their voices. People who feel disenfranchised for whatever reason, or unsafe to express their voice. We really need to make a concerted effort to hear those people, and I hope we've done that justice.
Have you seen the documentary Happy?
Oh, yes.
I was watching a little bit of it the other night, and they talk about the genetic set point that people have for happiness. Some people are just naturally born happier than others. What advice do you have for somebody who isn't born with that genetic predisposition for happiness?
Well, there's lots that someone can do to increase their so-called set point. First of all, you need to know that that's possible, and it takes concerted effort, right? It's not just going to happen. And some of the ways that many people who have done this research would suggest would be to, and this won't be in any particular order, but to first follow your passion. Whatever it is that inspires you, do it, right? Life is short. When we are actively engaged in things that we are passionate about, the energy is freely flowing and it allows our creative juices to flow, and we are in that space where we are the expression of our true self. So no matter what it is, put your energy into a place that is very positive for you. Nobody can tell you what that is, right? It has to be personal to yourself. Another very impactful thing that we can do is to meditate. Same thing. It allows for our mind to go to a different place, to be quieted, so that we don't have all that chatter in our head about what we ought to be, what we should be doing, who we are as defined by somebody else. And it allows for, and if you want to go to the spiritual place, which people said was important, it allows for us to be in touch with that essence of ourselves that is the spiritual essence. In that still quiet voice. I'm not saying that we have to be religious about this. It's not a religious thing for a lot of people. It's really about being in touch with the true essence of who you are. And when your mind is quiet, we are putting ourselves in a place where we have more clarity, where we have more creativity, where we have greater vision. So these are some things that, two very simple things that we can do that doesn't cost any money that we can do. And another thing is very simple things, and we're finding that the very simple things is to do something for somebody else. Get out of yourself and stop thinking it's all about me, me, me. We are social beings. We are interconnected. And when you do something for somebody else, it gives you that wonderful feeling inside. And I bet anybody that does this will have the sense that they have created greater sense of happiness, not just for the other person, but for themselves as well.
I know this might sound silly, but I learned a long time ago that going to YouTube and watching laughing babies is a good way. It's hard not to be happy when you watch that. A long time ago, somebody sent me a video they found on social media of a laughing baby, and it's hard to be unhappy when you see that.
It's
So,
so true. Why do you think they're so popular? Because
yeah.
we're all seeking ways to have greater happiness in our lives. But I'm glad you brought up media, actually, because the opposite of that can be true. If
Yes.
we get, steeped in the negativity of the media, which it can often be, we can really bring our energy down. We can bring our level of happiness way, way down. So it's really important to be discerning about our media diet, what we bring into ourselves.
I'm a news reporter for a radio station, so I definitely know how that feels because I'm constantly having to put bad news out there. And that's why I started this podcast, to be honest, so I can kind of counteract that with some good news, some positive things. So that's my
Thank you.
mission with this. Yes,
Thank
definitely.
you. Well, walking around the country, I met a lot of people like yourself in the world of media who felt that they really wanted to talk about the kinds of things that are really working well, that are inspiring to people in their communities, but they are limited in the amount of time that they can do that. There are a lot of good news initiatives happening in everyone's backyard, if not in your own home, right? And I think
Right.
we really need to be paying attention to those things too. And I think if you look at what's going on right now, today, and look at people who are out on the streets looking for a better way, most people are in a very peaceful, strong state, doing what they feel is right, they're passionate about. People are standing in and unifying all around our country. And that's a story that we need to be telling.
And unfortunately, the news doesn't show that as much. On social media, I saw a video of a cop gathering with some protesters and supporting them, and the person who posted it commented and said, "This will never make the media." So unfortunately, there are those good stories out there, but as far as mass media goes, it doesn't seem like they spend too much time on that.
Yeah. So we need to take personal responsibility for that. Well,
Yeah.
we get our news, and I know that you're in the news, so
Yeah.
this doesn't include everybody. We can't point fingers and put everybody in categories. We should never do that. Don't feel victimized.
Yeah.
Be empowered to search out the kinds of things that bring greater happiness to your life and to those around you.
Yeah. I always feel like news is important. We need to be aware of what's going on, but I don't think we need to dwell on that. I think you need to take breaks from it. That's what I try and do in my free time.
Well, that's self-care,
Yeah,
right? You knew
right.
what you needed in order to replenish yourself.
So, what is gross national happiness doing now that we have COVID-19 and the riots?
Part of what we do is to promote the measurements of the things that truly matter. So there are tools out there, such as surveys that people can use. And I'll give you just one example. Right now, there's a survey that will be happening once again in Vermont to get a sense of how people are feeling in these times as compared to some baseline information that they have, so that we can use that information to inform action, right? In policy. I mean, that's a whole intent of having the data, is to be able to use it and
Right.
to create ways to improve lives, right?
Mhm.
So we are working with the folks in Vermont. I'm originally from Vermont, so to do those measurements. Also to highlight how if we don't use these expanded measures of well-being and simply looked at our gross domestic product, our gross domestic product will likely go up in all this chaos. And that's because all the destruction that is happening will need to be repaired, right? And
Right.
in repairing that, there's an exchange of money, capturing materials, and that is what we measure. So what we are also doing is promoting reports and papers that show, listen, we need to also consider our humanity. The value of a life is not considered in our gross domestic product. We talk about that. So we're just asking people to view things in a different light.
What percentage of people have you found are truly happy in your research?
That actually is not a direct question that we have access to right now. I'm
Okay.
sure that we'll be able to, but I'll speak from my experience. Not as many as I would hope. And that over the course of the 7 years that I walked, fewer than I hoped. And I think that's because we seem to have gone from a place of complacency to a place of anger and great fear, interferes with our happiness. Now, that's not to say that's all bad, because being aware of the things that are going on is very, very important. And if we're aware of them and attend to them and change the conditions, that can hopefully open up the doors for people to experience equality and empathy for one another and justice, then that is what's going to raise our level of societal happiness. So we need to be aware of what's going on. And sometimes it's a grim reality.
How can people get involved in gross national happiness?
Well, I would suggest you take a look at our website, gnhusa.org. We also have a Facebook page. On our website, there are ways that you can get involved, ways that you can contribute to the work. We would love to have a larger group of people doing this work with us, impacting more and more communities across the country. So get in touch with us. There are ways to do that. info@gnhusa.org. People can have these conversations with one another. Like I said, listening is very important. One of the things that we promote are people gathering over food, because food is a great convener. And having these very serious, deep, important conversations, especially with people that you may not on the surface agree with, but try to find some common ground. In my experience, there always is common ground fun. So those are some ways that we would suggest being involved. Talk to your decision makers, whether it's at work or your local politicians, and educate them on this other way of looking at success and progress.
So if people request information from you, they can find out how they can apply this to their own community.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good.
Yes.
Very good. Now, do you have any upcoming projects that you'd like to talk about? Or is it just basically going through your data?
It's going through the data for sure, but it's also working with communities who are showing interest in bringing this type of view to their world. So for those interested in doing surveys, we are gladly working with them to look at their own communities and the measures that seem to fit best with their communities. We work with them, and working with businesses who we know that a happy employees create greater well-being for not just people, but for the organization as well. So we work with businesses to help them rethink what the bottom line ought to be, beyond an economic bottom line. There's the well-being of their employees and whatnot.
I have one last thing I want to talk about. This is kind of my thinking. You tell me what you think. Don't you think happiness is kind of breaking everything down to the simple things? What do you think?
I think you're not far off at all. In fact, you might be right on point.
Okay.
But I do want to start by saying that our organization, Gross National Happiness USA, is very interested in societal happiness. Okay, that's making sure that our policies and practices support people doing the very things that you're just talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
So when our freedoms are impinged upon, where we are unable to do that, that's a problem, right? when people aren't viewed equally as another person, that's a problem. And when our planet is not doing well, we could be peaceful inside, but out there, we need a healthy environment, and so do our animals. So yes, it absolutely, for me, if I were to say what the main message was from the people that I talked to, it is the little things, the simple things that we can do, the connections to one another. And there was a longitudinal study at Harvard, I don't know if you've heard about this, about happiness. And really, it came down to love. And I have to concur. For me, it comes down to love. Love of self, love of one another, love of this planet.
Love of your dog.
Of your dog, exactly.
Yes. My dog is my baby.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that's a whole nother, I think, realm of happiness is animals. They just bring so much joy and so much happiness, and they're like people.
So that's a great, great point. And a lot of people have pointed that out. In fact, we have an advisory member, past president, whose sole mission in life, it seems, is to highlight the fact that the happiness and well-being of animals does matter. And it's not just because they make us happy, right?
Right.
It's because they have intrinsic value in and of themselves.
They do.
As do all beings. So
Yes.
thanks for mentioning that. That is something that comes
Absolutely.
out pretty clearly,
Yes.
particularly with people that are around animals.
Oh yeah, they definitely they have feelings they love, and my dog will just stare into my eyes, and I know he's just saying I love you. He's just so sweet. But yeah, they bring a lot of joy.
Conditional love, right?
Exactly. He is happy every time I come home, without fail.
And he has his toys, so you're taking care of him. I heard those toys in the background. So.
He's like our kid. Well, thank you, Paula. Thank you for being on Born to Inspire.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. This was great fun. I appreciate it.
It was great fun, and I learned so much, and I'm definitely going to get involved, and I hope more people that listen to my podcast get involved as well.
Thank you, and thank you for spreading the word, because this is part of how it happens, word of mouth.
What an interesting episode, and really how timely. It seems now more than ever. Happiness is a challenge. I would like to say thank you to Paula Francis for being on the podcast and for all the hard work she does with Gross National Happiness. I plan on having her on the show again, along with others who are working in the happiness field. A quick shout out to Wolf Samuels, the multi-talented composer who wrote and performed this episode's music. Thank you to my executive producers, Richard Randall, Mary Helm, and Nia Bender. Today's podcast can be found at borntoinspire.co or on your favorite podcasting platform. My motive with this podcast is to build a community. If you would like to contribute, you can become a member at patreon.com/borntoinspire. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time on Born to Inspire podcast.